When you hear me speak, you hear the culmination of dozens and dozens of different ethnicities living in close proximity for centuries.
Know that the reason why our accent sounds like watered down Caribbean is because it is watered down Caribbean.
This is what I try to get across to people when they talk about our accent, and specifically like Cajun and the New Orleans accent, like Creole accents, things like that. Our whole area, they used to call New Orleans the northernmost Caribbean city. I, we look at the map of the Gulf of Mexico and how it was the third largest port in the country for hundreds of years. I mean, the same waves of immigrants that came through Ellis Island also came through the port of New Orleans, just like the port in Baltimore and everything like that on the East Coast. So when you think about that, especially our proximity to not only the indigenous peoples in the area, and then the exiled Cajuns, the Acadians, the Acadiens, and then the Spanish African influence of the Creoles in New Orleans, because at the time it was a Spanish colony before it was a French colony. And so all of this accounts for the ways that our accent grows and shifts. And I've got more in common with friends of mine, like slang wise, who are descendant of like Jamaican or in some form like family from the West Indies. There's words and phrases and things that that she mentioned in the video previously. Our patois, it is essentially a patois, the way that we speak. And you notice, for me, when I get into my accent, because I keep my accent very level when I'm having a conversation at work or I'm blah 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 blah. But if I'm talking the way that I'm naturally talking, I don't hit my T's. It's this and that. I don't talking like that, like that. I widen my mouth. Like, it is all about mouth posturing and things like that. And the way that I grew up hearing people speak essentially patois, little bits of French, little bits of indigenous languages, and most of the most of the names of things in New Orleans and in South Louisiana, like a chafalaya or a chapatulis, or my parish where I'm from called Tangipahoa. Like these are indigenous words. These are not English, Spanish, or French words. But it is interesting the way that it formed our accent and the way that we spoke with one another, because, and I've said this in other videos, the way that culture developed, there was the creolization of Louisiana becoming this French metropolitan area. And it's just really fascinating. And I truly think that we are unique for various reasons, because we do have a unique hold on our culture that carries over in a ways that a lot of other people don't. And then everything to be said cut off. But what I was gonna say was the reason that New Orleans developed the way that it did was because it was a large city, but it wasn't like Chicago or New York in the way that there was another side of the tracks, that you know what I mean, like these people lived on the other side of the tracks, whatever. The very, very wealthy live right beside the very, very poor in Louisiana. It is like nothing you could ever understand. You know what I mean? And it's just, they're like, Louisiana white people are different. Yes, because most of us would not be considered white in previous Louisiana law. You know what I mean? Like, I say this all the time. I don't look it. I am 6 generations removed from slavery. My grandfather's great great grandfather was born into slavery. Did you, and I didn't know until I put forth the research. And I've been mocked my whole life and called trash and this, that, and the other, and ghetto, and you're faking a black accent, and you think that you got a weird where you think you're from, and this and that. When you're home, people point out like, oh, where you from? Like, you sound like you sound like you're from the West Bank. You sound like you're, where you from? You from the swamp? Your mama from the swamp? Where's she from at? Like, freeze, I say from at, that there's just different linguistics, and it's purely linguistics that aren't really studied in a way that written language usually is. And oral history is severely important, particularly to the Cajuns and the Creoles and all the other peoples in South Louisiana. Which is why is a big reason why I do what I do on here. But when you hear me speak, you hear the culmination of dozens and dozens of different ethnicities living in close proximity for centuries.